Welcome to Inside View, the program where you get a view from the inside. I'm Sarah Lunsford, and my guest today is State Senator Dave Cox. Hi, Senator. How are you?
Sarah, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the program. Bet. First of all, I'm always curious as to how people get into the positions like you're in. What is your history?
Well, let me tell you, to begin with, I was in business and KVIE, which is a public television station that serves Sacramento and a significant portion of Northern California. I ran for the board of directors, didn't win.
Oh, okay.
And then ultimately I was appointed and then subsequently elected. But then Sacramento Municipal Utility District had a situation where one of the people that kind of lost favor, and so I decided to run. I won that race, won it in the general, and I served 4 years on the Sacramento Board of Supervisors, or 6 years on the Board of Supervisors after the SMUD board, and then after serving 6 years on the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, I was elected to the Assembly. Spent 6 years there, 3 years as the leader of the Republicans in the Assembly, and then I replaced Rico Aller as far as the Senate's concerned. So I'm now in my third year and got one more year to go in this term, and plan to stand for re-election, which would take me from 2008 to 2012.
Wow, that seems like a long way away, huh?
Well, but you know, the reality is you got to kind of plan for those things.
That's true.
People come up every now and then and say, "You're going to run again?" And the answer is yes. Plan to run again.
Now, what's it like to jump from a local board like the Board of Supervisors into the state legislature? You know,
I think it helps from the standpoint that you have some experience, and one of the things that happens when you go to an elected position, you know, you get there, you're expected to know the issues, and you're expected to be up to speed, and obviously it takes you less time to get up to speed if you've gone through certain steps. I feel I was advantaged when I moved from the SMUD board to the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors to the Assembly, and then from the Assembly to the Senate. I think those were just stepping stones for me.
Okay, so you sort of learn in each subsequent step.
I do, in fact, believe that experience makes some difference.
I would agree. Now, as far as in like today's world in the state legislature, the budget just got passed. And what do you think are the sort of economic realities in California now?
Well, let me talk about the budget for just a second. There were some who were concerned about the fact that the budget was, that my side of the aisle held the budget up for about 50 plus days, simply because of the fact that the budget wasn't balanced. We were asking our colleagues to make certain reductions. They were unwilling to do that. The governor did, in fact, agree to make a budget reduction of about $700 million using his blue pencil ability, which brought us, for all intents and purposes, brought us to a budget that was balanced. And so as we look at this year's budget, what we see is a budget that is balanced on paper. What we see out next year, by the way, is a budget that has a deficit of about $5 billion.
Yes.
So we would be much better served, we'd have been much better served if we had, in fact, made a greater reduction than the $700 million, which was blue penciled by the governor, Governor Schwarzenegger. We'd been much better off if we had added additional dollars, but because next year, it looks like as if we will have about a $5 billion deficit. Could even be more than that. Okay. You know that in California our economy is not as robust as it has been, in large measure because the residential housing market is not moving in the direction that it has been or will at some other point in time. But it is a situation that we have a deficit. A projected deficit somewhere around $5 billion next year.
Okay. So when one budget, when it's passed, it actually affects the next year's budget. Can you explain to our viewers how that actually works?
Well, what happens, of course, is that if you've got a budget, and let's say you got one item that's $1 million, and if you add 5% to that, now all of a sudden it becomes a $1,050,000
Yes.
So next year the budget doesn't start back at $1 million; it starts at $1,050,000.
Okay.
And so then you add that on top of that, and the next thing you know, it's that geometric progression that gets you in trouble.
And a lot of us didn't like geometry when we took it the first time.
Well, it is a situation that we don't use a business based budget model because everything begins with last year's expenditures,
yes,
or last year's budget numbers. So you don't start with a zero-based budget. You start with last year's numbers, and then you begin to add on top of that. So what we have are, simply said, we have automatic expenditures. It's like having something on autopilot. It's like something on your car that you do the auto drive.
Okay. Now, as far as that goes, is there a way that you can see to actually balance the budget? Because this has gone on for quite a few years.
Well, the answer to your question is there are really two sides in the Capitol. The first side believes that we in fact have a revenue problem. In other words, they believe the solution to this problem is to add more taxes to the budget. Then there's my side of the aisle that says that we don't believe that we in fact have a revenue problem. We believe that we have an expenditure problem. And so how do you solve that problem? You have to begin the process of determining whether a program is working or not working. If it's not working, you ought to be willing to set it aside and try something else. But by and large, we don't start a program in California and then discontinue. We've got programs that frankly are not doing the job. They would be, under most circumstances, considered to have failed, but they're still in place.
Yes.
And we'd be much better served if we said, thank you very much, we're going to set that aside and move and do something else.
How do you set aside a program that has been legislatively enacted?
Well, that's the difficulty.
The problem,
absolutely, yeah. That's the difficulty. You hit it right on the head. That's the reason bad programs continue to go, is because the legislature, in fact, got engaged. Okay.
So, you all were in special session.
Well, the answer to your question is the governor has requested a special session.
Yes.
The last day of the session, President Pro Tem Don Parada set in motion the special session.
Yes.
So let me tell you what happens.
Okay.
The President Pro Tem reads a proclamation from the governor of the state of California that calls for a special session. So President Pro Tem Parada called it into session, and we agreed who the sergeant would be. We agreed who the Secretary of the Senate would be. We agreed who the President Pro Tem would be, and all that sort of thing. So it's open. Now, of course, the question is, will anything be done during the special session?
That's the question.
Absolutely. And there are people who are meeting, who are talking about various issues. The governor called a special session relative to health care and relative to water. I don't know whether anything is going to get done relative to health care in the special session or water in the special session, but the governor has called for a special session. I will tell you that during the Gray Davis years, there was a time when he called for a special session. The President Pro Tem of the Senate opened the special session and closed the special session on the same day. So it's a call to action by the governor. It doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be anything done.
Okay.
Hope there is. We need to make some changes relative to health care, and we certainly need to get a handle on our water situation in the state of California.
Now, what changes do you see need to be made in health care?
Okay. Let me tell you about the health care situation. We've got about 37 million people in California. We've got about 6 million who are the so-called uninsured.
Yes.
And those are broken down into various, for example, we have illegals of about $1,200,000. We have about 1 million people who consider themselves to be immortal, and therefore
don't need it.
They don't need it. They wouldn't buy it, from that standpoint.
Okay.
Then there's probably another 1 million people that are eligible for insurance, all they have to do is fill out an application.
Yes.
So that probably leaves us with about 3 million people who are so-called uninsured.
In that in-between spot.
Exactly. Now, there are 6 proposals on the table. One proposal has been presented by Senator Sheila Kuehl, and that's what's called a single-payer plan.
Yes.
That's where the state of California would take over the health care and provide coverage for everyone in the state of California.
Okay.
It probably would require either a subsidy from the general fund or from the employer. Probably a contribution from the employee, probably a contribution from the individual who's being covered. Then there's my side of the aisle who doesn't want to throw out the entire system. We believe the real problem has to do with health care accessibility. Because you see, Sarah, if you have insurance but you can't find a doctor, it doesn't make any difference.
Well, you're actually in a unique position in your district because you have urban and rural areas.
That's correct.
That you cover. And so I assume that you see it from the rural perspective, healthcare, where you might have coverage but you can't find a doctor.
Absolutely.
Or you don't have coverage but you can get a doctor. You know.
Well, let me tell you, we didn't talk a great deal about the First Senate District, but it's 12 counties. We've got the northeastern 1/3 of the state of California. We go all the way up to Alturas, all the way to Fort Bidwell. We go down to Mammoth Lakes, and it is a situation that it's while I've got some suburbia and I've got some urban area, I do in fact have a significant portion of rural California. And, you know, there's a price that is paid because you live in a rural area. Now, it may very well be paradise, but in the final analysis, you don't have the same kind of services that you have if you live in a large metropolitan area. But, you know, the state of California and the federal government have created, in many respects, to the problems that we have. Let me just give you an illustration. The reimbursement rate for Medicare and the reimbursement rate for Medi-Cal are substantially lower, generally speaking, than insurance companies pay. So those people who have insurance, for all intents and purposes, are subsidizing the payments that are being made by the federal government or the state government. It is a situation that you then get out into the rural California, and you don't find the hospital, you don't find the doctors, you don't find the nurse practitioners, you don't find the health facilities.
Okay. And obviously the 30-mile rule plays into that as well.
Exactly.
As far as, for those people who don't know what the 30-mile rule is, the feds instituted that you have to be within 30 miles of your care facility.
For the health maintenance organizations.
Exactly.
Well, you know, when I go up, for example, up to Fort Bidwell or to Alturas, you know, you get out 50, 60 miles from Alturas. You're in the middle of nowhere, and you look over and you see a house and you see some cars, and you know there's a price that they pay.
Yes.
For being in that area. They in many respects are, you know, they take care of themselves.
Is there any way to help alleviate that issue of care, or is it just living in rural counties?
Well, it is difficult, but you know, I mentioned the aspect of providing health care accessibility, because even though you have health insurance, if you live where you don't have a doctor, you got a different kind of problem, and so from that standpoint, part of the issue, I guess, could be solved with doctors who work for clinics. Yes. In various areas. You know, we have lots of doctors who do internships and residency. Some of those could, in fact, be done in the rural areas. We have doctors who do their first 5 years in clinics that are on Indian reservations. There are all kinds of creative solutions to the problem.
Okay. Now, with your experience with the other legislative members who don't have rural areas in their district, do you find that they don't really understand the unique problems of rural counties?
Well, let me just tell you that's a battle we always fight.
Okay.
we fight the battle with our friends down in Los Angeles who believe that if it works in Los Angeles, it must work for Calaveras County.
Everybody else,
for everybody
yes.
else. It's got to, if it works in Los Angeles, it's got to work for Calaveras County. And that's something that we talk about all the time. Just because it works in Los Angeles doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in the northeastern part of the state of California. So one size doesn't fit all. So as bills come along, you have to also be cognizant of the fact that it creates all kinds of different burdens for different areas.
Is there a way around that?
Communication.
Okay.
Well, it's communication from the standpoint, and by the way, relationships. My good friend Alan Lowenthal had a couple of bills relative to the tethering of dogs at night. We went to Alan and said, Alan, that just won't work here, or that won't work there. What he was trying to do was to craft a bill so that you wouldn't train dogs to be fighting dogs. And what we were concerned about were the working dogs and what farmers have to do with their animals at night. And so from that standpoint, we were able to make some changes. But it is a situation that just because it works in Los Angeles doesn't necessarily mean that it'll work in the First Senate District.
It seems like you said that about the dogs, but it seems like it's like that with the gun legislation as well.
No question about that.
It works in L.A. or Southern California.
Yeah.
It's usually those members that seem to introduce those bills, but it doesn't necessarily work in rural California.
They do not understand the necessity of having a firearm. They don't understand the necessity of having the gun in the truck. They just don't get that part.
Which you can sort of understand their standpoint as well.
There's a lot of places in Los Angeles that law-abiding citizens probably ought to be carrying guns. But,
possibly.
but at any rate, there is a different mindset. There's no question about that.
Okay. Now the other thing that I wanted to talk about was water, and what you're seeing is happening with the water situation, because obviously we aren't going to have enough water in our storage facilities.
We have not done a good job as a state of California in providing the surface storage that we in fact need. When you begin to look at the statistics, you find that about 2/3 of the water falls north of the Tehachapi Basin, and 2/3 of the consumption, occurs south of the Tehachapi Basin. So it isn't as if we don't get enough water, but it is a situation of where we in fact do not store that water so that it can be released at a time when it's necessary. And I just came from a luncheon where we talked about desalination, and obviously that's one of the solutions of the future. And when it becomes more economically efficient and effective, you will begin to see desalination plants providing the water. But in the meantime, what we need to do is figure out how to take the resources that we have, and in many instances, the temporary solution is to build additional surface storage. We'll get great resistance, by the way, from some environmentalists who do not, in fact, want us to increase a dam by a foot or 10 feet, or as a matter of fact, they'd like to remove the dams from the streams.
A lot of people would, yes.
But
so how do you deal with that issue in the legislature?
Well,
then?
I think you have to be practical. The people in Southern California consume 2/3 of our water. I was talking to a person the other day, and they said, by the way, I was just talking to my daughter down in Southern California, and they don't have rationing. And she said, but we have rationing. Here I am, and our water, I mean, the water they have is the water that comes from here.
Yes.
And we're rationing, but they're not. And the question was, why not? So what really has to occur is that we've got to get into a situation where we, in fact, have the surface storage to take care of the water so that it can be released at the appropriate time.
Now, what kind of surface storage
dams
would you, besides dams, obviously?
Well,
but
there are some other things. I mean, you can, in fact, have some in-ground injections. You inject the water back into the ground
aquifers,
and the aquifers, and you fill up the aquifers again. That's certainly one of one of the ways.
So then the state would have to work with local jurisdictions to make that happen?
Yes, in many respects, or the state of California could, in fact, on its own, decide that that's what we're going to do.
Now, I just read recently the governor had mentioned putting $9 billion worth of bonds on the ballot to fund sort of water issues.
Yes.
What are the details of that?
Well, the governor has recognized that we have a water problem. And, you know, there aren't very many people in the state of California that don't acknowledge that we have a problem as far as water is concerned. What occurs, though, is we have the question about what's the best solution.
Yes.
There are those who believe that you can do it this way or you can do it that way. But the practical, the common sense approach says that, look, if you have plenty of water, it then becomes a distribution situation. So how do you contain it so that you can distribute it when you need it? And that's where we begin to talk about the creation of new reservoirs.
Okay.
The increasing of existing reservoirs. Maybe you take a one that's got a dam of 20 feet and you make it 25 feet in height, or you create a new dam.
Okay.
Or a new reservoir.
How open is the legislature to that type of thing?
Well, the answer to your question is as the water crisis draws near, I think you probably find that there are more people who are interested in doing something about it than there were. You know, the legislature has a great propensity to only deal with one crisis at a time.
Oh, okay.
One crisis.
So we have to wait a little while then.
One crisis at a time, and that frankly is the failure of the legislature to do it just one crisis at a time. But I mean, that's what happens to be that's what reality is.
So do you see the governor trying to get ahead of the curve then?
Well,
with
the
bond?
We've had, I don't know how many billions of dollars of money that has been spent heretofore relative to water, but we've never had the surface storage that this particular proposal calls for.
Okay.
There's a reservoir up in Northern California, and there's one down in the Central Valley. That would, in fact, create new water storage in the state.
If they were raised, if the dams were raised?
Yes, exactly. Sykes Reservoir is one, and I don't remember what the other one's called this very second.
Okay.
But that's what that's all about. It's a creation of a reservoir.
Okay. And I'm going to switch gears again and talk about jails. Because as you know, Calaveras County is angling for a new jail.
Well, let me just tell you with respect. I didn't mean to jump in there, but
that's okay.
You know, there are 172,000 adult incarcerated in the state of California, and about a third of the system is under the jurisdiction of the federal courts. There's there is a receiver there, and their job is to look at the way the correctional system functions. But in talking to the Calaveras County Sheriff, you know, he has a situation where he books about 85 people a day. He's got capacity for 65, so there comes some point in time where he's got to say, hey, you go, you're out, and you know, just turning the bad guys back on the street. So I think it's the time is right. There is a bond that's being proposed by the state, which is a 75-25 ratio.
Yes. The
state of California would put up 75%. The local jurisdiction would put up 25%. And so that's what the Sheriff Down is talking about when he talks about a bond for Calaveras County, is to raise the money to be a match with the state's money.
Okay.
And I will tell you that there will be lots of people lots of counties who will be after this.
That's what I've heard, yes.
And there is no chance for the county that doesn't have a match. No chance.
Okay. So the match has to be there.
My judgment tells me that the match has to be there.
Okay. So even if all the other ducks are in a row, if the money is not there, the match money, then they have no chance.
My guess is that those counties that have matches have a significantly greater opportunity to receive a grant than those who don't.
Okay. Do you see a connection between the overcrowding and the state prison level and the local jail level?
As I said, there's 172,000 adults who are incarcerated. It is a situation that we need to build some new prisons.
Yes.
And there are those who, by the way, also believe that we need to change our policy relative to rehabilitation, because we have about a 70% recidivism rate. In other words, what that means is about 70% of the people who get out go back in.
Yes.
And so we've got to figure out somehow how you change that, because if you could just make a 10% difference or a 20% difference, you've in fact changed the numbers a great deal. So we've got to help from a rehabilitation standpoint, and that, Sarah, is easier said than done. Because what happens is a person gets out of prison, if they go back to their old jurisdiction, they got $200 in their pocket. First thing they know, you run out of the $200, they commit the old same crime again, and they're back in jail. So we've got to do a better job as far as rehabilitation is concerned.
Would that mean putting more money into the prison system? Yeah, the front end, yes, instead of the back end.
You got to put it in. You got to put it in the front end, and then at the same time, when you're about ready to let people out, you need to be certain that they have the skills that make them employable.
Okay. And how exactly do you do that, though? Do you just put more programs in?
Well, programs certainly help, but many of the people who are incarcerated are there because they can't read. They have a second or third grade reading, so you've got to put in programs that teach them some skills, so that they have the skill that's necessary to get a job and keep a job and earn a living.
Now, this seems to be a dynamic shift from what even a few years ago people thought the prison systems were for, or even the local jails. In your experience with the legislature and even your local experience, is it such a big shift?
Well, I think there's an evolution. I think there's an evolution. When we talk, let me shift with you and say, when we talk about we talk about crime rates, for example. Yes. If you say it was so many per 100,000, and then you begin to look at those numbers, the numbers are one thing, but if you're a victim of a crime, it's 100% at that point. Forget about what the statistics said. It's 100%. And so, what we have got to do is to figure out a way that when someone is incarcerated, that they, if they're eligible to get out and they get out with the skills where they can in fact earn a living and take care of a family and become a contributing member to society. So is that a change from the past? Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. And
a good change.
Well, if it works.
If it works.
I mean, that's the key.
Well, you've been in the legislature long enough to,
I do in fact believe in rehabilitation, and I do think that we've got to work towards that. You can only help those people, by the way, who want to help themselves, and so from that standpoint, I think you have to have programs that teach the incarcerated a trade, a skill.
Help them on their way.
Something that helps them earn a living.
Okay. Well, you know what? That's our time.
Oh, my goodness.
And thank you for coming on my program again. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining me here on The Inside View. I hope to see you again soon.